Tell me what you're seeing in this first weekend for Golden Week, and I suppose your expectations of whether the strength of this rebound, which we really have started to see across the board, whether you talk about, the sort of more industrial indicators or retail spending and consumer sentiment in China, really take hold.
Yeah, I think it's kind of remarkable, as you said in your introduction, that capacity is constrained to 75%, and yet we did 25% better than our best year, which was last year. So I think that's clearly an indication where people feel safe. And in fact, they are safe. They really want to resume their lives. They want to go back to the movies. They want to go back to restaurants. They want to do a lot of things. And I think China in particular, but Asia in general, is ahead of the Western world in that. As you know, it hasn't gone as smoothly in a lot of businesses as it's gone in China. But I think the indications are quite good that they want to get back to normal.
And at the same time, of course, around the world, you've got kind of more of an existential crisis as to whether businesses like cinema can actually survive. But with China, given the recovery that we're seeing, does that mean that changes or kind of, keeps intact your expansion plans?
Yeah, well, I don't think the message in the rest of the world is survival, because I think from the China experience, we know that there's pent-up demand for going to the cinema. And we know that when people feel safe and healthy, they're going to go. In the United States, on the other hand, that's the other end of the spectrum where people just don't feel comfortable at this point in time. So I don't believe it's an existential issue. I think the lessons of China, not just from the National Day weekend, this weekend, you go back a few weeks ago to when the 800 came out, and that did $115 million in its opening weekend, which is, I think, in the top 10 Chinese local language movies of all time. So I think the proof points are there. The question is, when are the rest of the countries in the world going to catch up to China? And when is Hollywood going to feel comfortable releasing their blockbuster movies globally, where the rest of the world is like China?
So what does that mean in terms of adding more screens in China then?
Yeah, well, we've done very well there. We have about 700 plus screens open. We have another about 300-ish in backlog. We've signed a few deals this year in China, one with Wanda, another one with a number of other operators. So there's great demand in China. As we speak, we're opening new screens there. There's also a lot of dialogue going on. China is our largest market in the world for IMAX. It's about 40% of our screens globally, even though we're in 82 countries. And to give you a reference point, in North America, we have 400. And as I said, in China, 700, with several hundred still to go. So the demand is growing there. The Chinese consumer really wants to go to the movies. The Chinese consumer is also brand conscious. They also want something innovative, the next kind of thing, forward-looking, and it's a terrifically promising market for us.
What other markets are you optimistic about?
Actually, a number of them. Japan has gone very well for us in recent years. I think we have about 30, 35 theaters open with a backlog opening. Korea, we just signed a large deal with CGV, the largest cinema operator there. And we have, I think, about 16 open now, and we're opening another 8 or 10 in Korea. Saudi Arabia is a rapidly growing market. As you know, there was no cinema in Saudi Arabia until about a year ago. And since it's open, it's been very, very successful. And we have, I think, 25 theaters slated to open in Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, can't build them fast enough. And then I think Western Europe also, once it starts to feel safe again and cinema gets back to normal, I think that's a very good market as well.
In the meantime, we continue to see coronavirus cases surging again globally. And here in the U.S., we continue to hear talk of potentially shutting down again, some schools and businesses closing here in New York. What's really, you say that survival is not an issue, but is it survival until at least you get the vaccine? And what will that look like? And will we see more bankruptcies of theaters in the meantime?
Yeah, I think that's the right question you asked, is what happens between now and the vaccine. For IMAX, we have a very strong balance sheet. We have over $315 million in cash. Our cash burn is less than $9 million a month. But now that China's open, it'll be significantly less than that. So for us, we have a long runway and a lot of staying power. For cinemas in general, they tend to be much more levered than we are. So I think there will be some short-term cash issues. And I think what they're going to have to do is just manage their spend rates until there's a vaccine and Hollywood releases more films and they can come back in a direct way. But I think most of the major ones have raised capital during the last several months, with the financial markets being very amenable. So I suspect a lot of them will make it through it, but it's a matter, as I said, of cost control and how soon it reopens.
What about the availability of content, right? Because we know that the latest James Bond has been pushed back to next April. We know that Disney is trying new things like the streaming experiment with Mulan. Is there, particularly in the Chinese market, now just a natural kind of gravitation towards made in China films? I'd also like to get your views as to, if there is so much demand for cinema going, why was Mulan not as successful as a lot of people expected it to be?
So in China, there is a lot of local content as well as in Japan. And IMAX has been in China since around the year 2000. We have lots of relationships with filmmakers and studios in China. And we have 10 local language films available between now and the rest of the year. So there's a lot of content going on there. I think movies got pushed because in North America, it didn't open up as quickly as China opened up. And there are a few reasons for that. One is people just don't feel as good about the virus. And you talked about infection rates. They're more leery about going to out-of-home experiences. It didn't happen the same way it happened in China. Also, in China, they were very intelligent about the way they reopened. They opened about a month before some of the blockbuster movies came out. So people got comfortable going to theaters. And then when the movies opened, it was just a natural progression. In the US, because of local regulation, it kind of happened very suddenly. And then the movies came out right away. So people really weren't conditioned to go. And in a lot of cases, if you read the polling data, they didn't even know the cinemas were open. In terms of Mulan, the results were not as good in China as was expected. But I think that probably had more to do with how the movie played rather than any safety concerns.